Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ARKAT's podcast. I'm Ahmed Mulla, joined by my fantastic co-host, Fatma Al Khayat. Today, we're delving into a critical topic that affects every single one of us on the road. Traffic safety is a pressing issue, especially in rapidly evolving cities like Dubai. Whether you're a driver, a pedestrian, or a cyclist, safety impacts us all. And today, we're lucky to have an incredible guest to help us unpack it all, Dr. Mostafa Al Dah. Dr. Mustafa is a renowned traffic expert with decades of experience across cities like New York, London, Riyadh, and of course, Dubai. He's played a pivotal role in developing strategies to make our roads smarter and safer.
And today we're going to be exploring three themes. First, Dr. Mustafa will share his journey into traffic safety and the lessons he's learned from working globally. Second, we'll delve into Dubai's unique challenges when it comes to traffic safety and what current methods are being implemented to tackle this in specific. Lastly, we'll go into and explore innovative solutions and the role of future of technologies when it comes to creating safer roads. So if you've ever wondered why a big part of Dubai's traffic is the way it is today, please stay tuned. And without further ado, Dr. Mustafa, we know that traffic safety isn't just a professional challenge, it's a mission. Can you please share with us how you started your journey? What inspired you to go into the journey of traffic safety? And what are some of the key milestones along the way?
All right. Thank you very much first for having me here. Again, it's great to be in a new podcast. I'd love to share my story. Again, I was really obsessed with cars growing up, like many people are in the UAE. And so I wanted to study something at university that was related to cars. So I found a university called Loughborough in the East Midlands in the UK that had a degree in automotive materials engineering. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started my undergraduate studies. And part of that degree was to take a year out, like a placement year at a company or an institution. So I looked around, I did lots of searching, and I found a research center for vehicle safety that belonged to the university actually nearby. So I applied there and I got in. So that was my first kind of crash course into vehicle safety, because I didn't even know that we had a safety research center at the university. So that was, again, I was a very diligent placement student. I was, again, one of the best they ever had, which is why when I finished my bachelor's degree, they invited me to come back and do a PhD.
Okay.
You did really well in your second year, third year at the university, and it seems like you learned a lot and you're a hard worker. So we think you'd be a good fit for our PhD program. And they had just started that up as well. So I'm like, okay, right place, right time. Yeah. I really had wanted to come back to Dubai at the time, but I thought, what's another 3 years in the grand scheme of things? And that was my introduction into vehicle safety. So I discovered that the UK and Europe, the UK was in Europe back then. So we're talking about 2002, 2003. They've got a lot of research going on and a lot of funding that's dedicated to improving safety on the roads and saving lives on the roads. So it was a key strategic point for European Union funding and for the UK government's funding. They had long-standing research projects in accident investigation. The longest one that the UK had started in 1983. So imagine they had a continuous data set from 1983 to around 1999. For car crashes. So it's a very mature, let's say, topic, more mature than it is in the UAE. So I was fascinated. That's what I
What years did you spend in the UK?
So I was there from 2000 to 2014.
Okay.
That was 14 years of, studying, researching, investigating accidents, a little bit of teaching. The university had a new program, a master's in road safety, where they asked me to help them develop some modules for that. So it was fascinating, and it was really interesting to see how research feeds into the products that we use every day.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense that where did the side airbag come from? Where did seatbelt pretensioners come from? What's crumple zone? So it's like, this is where, and this is how they prove things. They prove things out on the actual market. I remember a case back in the day when a small French car maker, again, I won't mention the names, but they had some reports of passengers being injured by the side airbag. So at the time, side airbag was still new in the 2000s. And I was like, okay, how can we prove or see, delve more into this? So they approached the university and the Department for Transport, who kind of owns the database, say, hey, do you have any cases where our cars are involved, where we can have a closer look at these things? And of course, the database that we had was really, really in-depth. We're talking about like 200 fields of data for every crash. Okay. So it's much more detailed than what the police would normally record on their standard one-page form. And there's pictures, sometimes there's videos, there's statements, witness statements, and so on. So you could really delve into, causes and hopefully, that's why my title of my thesis includes injury reduction, because that's the main thing. If you're not doing something to improve the lives of people, to extend the lives of people, then it's kind of, what's the point?
And what was the title of your research, the full title?
So that's again interesting, because in the first year of my PhD, I was like, let's go with the flow, see what you guys are doing at this research center, and I'll do more of it. So my study was going to be about the UK safety and accidents. Whereas 1 year into it, I got better at doing literature reviews and looking up resources and so on. I'm like, why am I doing this about the UK? I'm like,
I was just going to ask, did you manage to delve into research here in the region, in the GCC?
It didn't make sense, after doing it for a year, and I sat through my, kind of the MPhil, I guess, Viva, the one they do at the end of the first year. Yeah. And I'm like, I think I want to change the subject. They're like, but we don't have any data on the UAE. We don't have any data.
I was just going to ask about that. How did you manage to get the data?
Yes, that was a big question mark for my supervisors. They're like, you're on your own out there. We're happy to support you. We'll give you the university letterhead,
the guidance,
a letter of support, but you're going to have to go and knock on doors and find your own data. I'm like, okay, let's give it a try. So my first year and a half was I guess, about research methods. Yeah. And so when I decided I want to do my study on Dubai, I came back to the UAE for a few weeks. I was armed with the university, let's say, official letter stamped and signed. I went to the Dubai courts. I went to the public prosecutor. I went to Dubai police. I went to the RTA, and eventually they agreed to give me access to accident data from both the RTA and the police. So it was a long journey, but I'm glad that I went through it, because again, it introduces you to many of the people in that area, and then discover how little is being done in this area and in the region. And the little that is being done. So I found 2 PhDs that had been done on traffic safety in the UAE. I think one was in Abu Dhabi, a guy from Al Mubarak family, and another was a lecturer in Al Ain, UAE University in Al Ain. Okay. So I found a little bit of, I guess, foundation to stand on. And then that's the beginning of my study.
Dr. Mustafa, you've had a chance to work in some of the world's biggest cities. I wanted to get your point of view of how does traffic safety stack up in the UAE versus cities like London or New York? And what are unique challenges that we have in the UAE when it comes to traffic safety?
All right, that's a very good question. Thank you. I mean, I spent most of my time in the UK in that little town called Loughborough, around 2 hours north of London. I would only go to London or Nottingham or the bigger cities if I had business there. But I have driven extensively all over the place. So I've driven in Germany, in the UK, in the UAE, and I've been driving from a young age here. Yeah. And it's fascinating once you come to compare the figures and the causes. So, for instance, in the UK, you'd have rural roads, roads in the countryside were really dangerous. They're really considered dangerous. Where like 90% of people die on those roads, and only 10% die on their motorways.
Very interesting.
Whereas in the UAE, it's kind of the other way around.
Exactly. Why do you think that's the case?
So in the UK, I mean, there's a huge population that lives out in the countryside, right? Yeah. But it's really, really scattered. It's like, I think the budgets for maintaining the roads, the small, what they call B and C roads, and unclassified roads in the countryside is much less than it is for motorways. And again, the UK is a very bureaucratic place, so it takes ages to build a motorway or a new system or any new project. So I think they got the highway system really good, and they got it really safe. Whereas the countryside was less safe. And again, it's also the variable weather. So, the extremes they have, in summer you have really low sunsets where, the sun hits you in your eyes. And in winter you could have sleet, you could have snow, you could have really dangerous conditions. And also the road user base, I guess, in the countryside might be less maybe adherent to laws when it comes to drinking or driving under the effects of alcohol and other substances. So it's interesting. The UK in the 60s had a real cultural problem with drink driving, but by the 90s, 2000s, they had actually kind of turned the tables on that. It became socially unacceptable to drive while impaired. So that's something really interesting to see, that it took them a while, but they did get there. And I'm hoping, if the, again, impaired driving is an issue here, or again, leaving a safe distance is an issue here, we can also have that cultural change eventually to make it more acceptable and safer for everyone.
And I think that's interesting because we at ARKAT always have this debate around is safety an issue of enforcement or is it an issue of design? And we always struggle, like, where's that line between, like, where good design actually supports traffic safety and where you have to do it through enforcement or policies. And it's a very thin balance between the two.
And I think to add to that, the type of enforcement that we're talking about is like dedicating zones for pedestrians or implementing traffic calming measures. And I think what's also interesting, and this is also another debate that we always have, is what could that be the effects on Dubai's traffic congestion by implementing such measures? What do you think, in your opinion?
I mean, you might go back to your days in London and think, was there any space for speeding in central London? It's almost impossible to speed in central London because of the design of the city, because of how congested it is. Whereas in Dubai, we still have areas which are, again, maybe more flexible in that respect. But at the same time, I would like to take it all back to the human element. Again, when I was at this research center at the university, I was introduced to the word of ergonomics and human factors, which again, to me was a brand new one. I'm like, I've never heard this before. What does it mean? So it's all about, again, just to help your viewers, I guess, listeners understand more, it's about designing around human beings and the needs of human beings. And it's fascinating that even much more developed, let's say, industries still struggle with this. I mean, one of the causes, I think there was a new design of aircraft by Boeing or Airbus, and then they discovered that a very, very small design detail, like two switches looked the same as each other, but had completely different functions. And sometimes the pilots would get confused, and that would lead to crashes. It's like, it took, a very robust system of, again, but with aircraft, every single incident, every single near miss is investigated, and there's recommendations. And these recommendations often result in changes in regulation. And they go back, and if they need to, they change hundreds of planes that have already been built to make them compliant to the latest. So the question is,
so much to go.
Why don't we have the same for traffic
for
and cars?
Roads and cities, because
absolutely
to this day we still see some new places where there's a road, I guess a split in the road, and then they put this kind of crash cushion right there. And as soon as that road opens, you know that the next day someone's going to crash into it. And this is a calming device that costs like 50,000, 100,000 dirhams, it's like, and I'm pretty sure that people who installed it, they know exactly what's going to happen after they install it. So why are we still doing these things when we know that this is the outcome? Is there something else that we could do that's different or that's more effective or that? So I think it all goes back to the human element. We need to keep studying. We need to have research data. We need to have something solid on what's going on in our roads, in our cities. Do you think
today. I agree with you in terms of human behavior, influencing human behavior. But do you think that we need to put out as well good urban infrastructure to support human behavior or to support the changes in human behavior?
Definitely. I think we really need to take a hard look at what our, I guess, cities want or need today, because it's kind of one thing to say that, okay, we're going to build a new mass transit system and spend X billion on it, and then find out that, hang on, the people who want to get to that mass transit system have to cross a road that's, I don't know, it's like we've not thought the whole journey through. And then there was a fascinating visual I saw at university while I was at Loughborough. Someone had done a study on I think visualizing how people get to work from like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Okay.
So there was a very nice, the people who are on bikes come in a certain color, people who are on pedestrians, people who are running to work. And it was like, why don't we do that on a small scale, on a bigger scale in some areas which have some issues, and to try and look at, okay, what are the city dwellers looking at right now? What do they need? And how can we support them? Because infrastructure is very inflexible. Once you build it, it's there for a long time. And it's a big challenge to reassign it, or like we have seen some areas in Dubai like Al Fahidi or near the old British consulate, and how they've renovated the whole Asif area. And,
Yeah.
so it is possible,
Mm-hmm.
but again, to what end? Then is it a case that we need to become? Maybe do we expect the government to be more prescriptive in terms of, this is, if you're going to live here, you're going to have to go to school here, you're going to have to work nearby, you're going to have to, because
Which
then,
a lot of cities do.
yes,
Yeah, they have
yes.
school districts, and you work and you go to school within that same district. And if you live somewhere else, then it's harder to get your kids, for example, in a school somewhere else. And that's mainly because of traffic, and to reduce congestion and make trips shorter from like home to school.
Yeah, and I think that leads us to our next question. So Dubai has come a long way in terms of urban planning and infrastructure. How do you think Dubai, or how Dubai's approach to traffic has evolved over the years?
So again, we've had many improvements over the last 20 years. So one of the things we see more of is pedestrian facilities. So when I started my PhD thesis, there was like, I think maybe 20 crossings in Dubai.
Wow.
And now I think we have more than 140 bridges, and metro stations and underground ways. So you've really come a long way in terms of providing for people other than the car user, because the car user is the original, user of roads in Dubai, and the roads were designed initially, and the city was designed around
For
that.
cars,
I think,
right?
Yes,
True.
and I think we're seeing more. Again, a move towards different modes of transport. The Dubai Canal project, again, was a crazy, massive infrastructure project, which maybe is, I don't know, underutilized, because I discovered later on, after being in the UK for a few years, that actually the canals in the UK were used as a major form of transport for many years before. And it's actually an alternative form of transport. Even if the weather is bad in the sea and you can't get out that way, you can actually get some ships through, inland, through these waterways. So I'm like, there are other possibilities. And I know some people, like some of my friends who go fishing in, in the Northern Emirates, are like, yeah, I could get to Dubai in like half an hour when there's traffic using my speedboat.
Right.
So maybe we need to look at, I've just heard of I think they're starting design of a new air taxi station in Dubai. So maybe, it's time to give the roads a rest and just look at what else can be done.
Sure, and I like that you mentioned marine transport, especially given Dubai's urban geography. I mean, we have the canal, we have the Dubai Creek, we're a coastal city, a lot of developments are waterfront, so I think there's really a big potential for marine transport. But I think it goes back to what you said earlier. It's creating a holistic journey from the person leaving their origin to their destination, making sure that that whole trip is seamless. Today, really, the best way or the fastest or most convenient way we can do it is through cars. So it's really, and I like that you said it's time to give cars a break from the road, because not everyone drives. And so the fact that we dedicate most of our roads space to one type of user or mode is also not fair. We should have dedicated bus lanes, sidewalks for pedestrians, bike lanes for cyclists, exactly. So it's giving back the road to other users as well. And that would actually help traffic safety, right?
Yes, and if I may mention an event I've been to last month, I think at a school in Dubai, a public school. So there was a joint event between Himaya, the Dubai police kind of protection arm, and the traffic department, and the KHDA and the RTA. So it was really interesting. A bunch of stakeholders all in the same place. Someone from Emirates Transport as well, quite senior.
Oh, wow.
And they were discussing, say, in an open forum, kind of the ideas. And one of the stats that came up was like, the school we were in has about, I think, 2,000 students. And they're like, imagine 2,000 cars coming every day today. And they're like, how many buses could take these students? And I think we did the calculation. It was something like 40 buses.
Wow.
So it was like, you could replace 2,000 cars with 40 buses. So it's like, yes, it's a cultural shift to convince maybe parents, especially Emirati parents, to think, okay, am I going to send my kid? Are they going to be safe in a school bus? But maybe it's needed. And maybe it's another way of using our roads, because I think our roads are being underutilized in a way because of the way that we use them.
Right.
And again, there's an issue of lane discipline here, which again, I would love to touch on and talk about, because I think we build massive 6-lane highways. But if, road users still come in to join the highway, and then they go into the middle lane when there's no one on the right, no one on the left, it's like, we're not using them in the best capacity possible. So
Oh, wow. Okay, I never thought. That's a very
Yeah.
interesting perspective.
yeah, we've got the design capacities for highways here that are a certain number, but I don't think we ever get there because of the way that the users end up using these roads. So again, maybe it's a mix of enforcement and education and incentives and other things. But I think we could use the existing roads we have a lot better if we focused a lot more on driver behavior and lane discipline and such things. Yeah.
When it comes to strategies, also at ARKAT, we really admire policies like Sweden's Vision Zero policy, which focuses on shared accountability between road users and planners. So this actually cut road fatalities in Sweden by 70%. What do you think about that approach, Doctor? Rather than putting the blame on the car user, we also have a shared accountability with traffic planners or city planners to say, look, you mentioned this point earlier, if, for example, you have a traffic hotspot or accident hotspot where pedestrians are constantly getting hit by cars or traffic accidents are happening, shouldn't there be a shared accountability between the traffic planners and the road users?
I think we could definitely make more use of let's say, there's a grassroots movement, I think, here in the UAE, especially from people who are touched in one way or another by a traffic safety incident.
Interesting.
To change. Because I was shocked. I mean, again, my own kids were involved in a crash a year ago.
Oh, no.
And it was fortunately a very low impact crash.
Okay.
It was a rollover, but again, rollovers are one of the best kind of crashes to have, if I can say that as an investigator, because the energy gets dissipated. So it's when a car, is no longer on the four wheels, it flips over and turns. So in terms of the dramatization, it's a very dramatic event to look at. But in terms of safety and safety outcomes, it's actually a good place to be, because especially if you're belted, if you're using your seat and your seat belt correctly, then it's kind of safer than a typical crash where you suddenly stop, because over here you dissipate the energy over a long period of time. So, if you stop in 10, 20 meters, it's much softer on the human body, on the car, than stopping suddenly provided that you stay in the car, of course. So when we had that incident, the ambulance came along and took them to hospital. And I got to go into the deep end of what's it like when you become a victim of, or injured in a car crash. And they had very, very light injuries. But I discovered that actually there's not much support for victims of car injuries. I mean, when there's a fatality, it's kind of more straightforward. Okay, there's a diya or the blood money that gets paid, there's insurance gets involved, and that's kind of fairly clear cut. But when there's an injury, it's a much more complex thing. And we have like 10 times as many injury crashes as we have fatalities. So if we have like 100 fatalities a year, say in Dubai, we have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people injured. So what happens to those people? And it's every one of them is a family that's been touched. And again, going back to my school days, I can remember every single family that I know had been touched in one way or another by a fatality or by an accident or by. And again, so why do we accept this kind of thing? I mean, we don't accept, let's say, airplane crashes. We don't accept. We're doing things to stop deaths from cancer, from diabetes, from other things. But why don't we treat traffic safety as a priority, as a public health priority, and like say aim for Vision Zero? Because I think in Sweden, the systems are a lot more maybe uniform in terms of their driving population. I think they don't get half as many tourists as we do here. They don't get this transformation like, every year you got a transient population of 50,000 new licensed drivers or 100,000 new vehicles.
That come from different cultures as well, and then they come with their own behaviors and ways of driving.
And the ways of licensing them are different as well. So I was lucky to have I got my UAE license in 99. And again, that was like a 5-minute driving test. Again, but I'm sure things have changed since then. But when I went to the UK, I got my license there in 2002. And it took me about a 45-50-minute driving test. So it's a very different system. And
that's very rigorous.
It is. So you can pretend to drive well for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, but you can't pretend for longer.
45-50 minutes, that's true.
So there's something to be looked at again when it comes to driver education and qualification, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that you touched upon different driving behavior and licensing requirements from different countries. I mean, in Dubai, definitely diverse driving challenges comes with its own set of challenges, let's say. We have over 200 nationalities, and so you're dealing with different driving habits and expectations. Of course, designing our infrastructure in a certain way can help guide behavior. But I wanted to ask you, Dr. Mostafa, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to achieving safer streets in the UAE?
All right, that's an interesting question again, and especially as the UAE is so dynamic. Every year we have different, again, new projects, new priorities. I think one of the challenges is the diversity that we have and the pace of change. Again, our Minister for Infrastructure came on the other day and was saying we have an 8% growth rate this year, and it's like, unprecedented and a bit crazy to deal with. So on the one hand, there's the challenge of the pace of change, but on the other hand, I think we also have a giant kind of playground when it comes to testing out new technologies, testing out new ideas, what if we could find, say, an application on your phone that incentivizes, good driving in a way that there's no fines, there's no imprisonment, there's no, that's pure incentive based and reward based.
And you get rewarded for good driving rather than like a carrot instead of a stick.
Yes, and CSR initiatives are a big thing for large corporations, and we have huge cooperation here with lots of big names. We've heard in the last few days, X.com and Microsoft. There's so much happening with big corporations, with big funding. So maybe we could just need to turn the tables around a little bit and say, okay, 100 traffic officers can only do so much on Dubai's roads nowadays.
The poor guys,
need to find a different way of, and everyone's attached to their phone and their devices. So maybe there's some way we can use that to start something off that will actually encourage people. Because most of the people, I've done so many interviews with people who've been involved in crashes, and like one of the first things you hear is, I didn't expect it to happen to me. Again, that people think that all these fatalities that happen, it always happens to someone else. It's never me. And that, that they are more or less that I'm a better driver than everyone else, which is, again, kind of, it's a normal human thing to think. But at the same time, I think people using cars, they don't realize how much or how risky the act of driving is. And instead they give their attention to other things while driving, which is really, I think it should become socially unacceptable. I mean, if you're in charge of a 1.5 ton and a 2 ton machine, then your attention should be 100% on that machine until we get the technology in to actually take control from us.
Absolutely. And you could be the best driver in the world, but then someone could crash into you. So you're subject to many factors that are unpredictable and out of your control anyways when it comes to driving.
Yeah, and talking about different initiatives, and we know that the UAE has implemented very advanced measures like strict fines, speed cameras, but do you think that there is room for improvement, and how actually effective are these measures that we have at hand?
So a big part of my PhD thesis was reviewing the effectiveness of countermeasures.
Amazing.
Let's unpack that.
We had so I found a couple of really good references. So there's this a book called The Handbook of Road Safety Measures that came out of Norway. So 3 authors spent many years putting together kind of meta studies, of the effectiveness of different countermeasures on the road. And some measures are really effective, like separating pedestrian traffic from other forms of traffic. Is really really effective in keeping pedestrians safe. But that sometimes that's not so practical. So in one way, it's good to look at what's been done elsewhere. And our authorities here have really imported some of the best technologies around the world. So we have the latest laser radar, this and that, lots of the latest technologies, and they've all been shown to reduce injuries and accidents.
They say by almost 40%.
They're really highly effective. But at the same time, they've become a really big revenue generator for the government, just like SALIC. So it's funny, I mean, we have about more than 1 billion dirhams of fines collected every year from police activities.
Wow, that's just in
aside
Dubai?
from SALIC. This is just the police. So we have a huge revenue stream there that people seem to be happy to again pay, because nobody forces anyone to commit an offense. People are fully aware when they do these things, and if there's an error, I know the authorities will go and correct it. So it's like we've kind of found a way maybe to finance some part of the spending through these methods, but I'm saying that there must be other ways. I mean, they are effective, but I think we need kind of a unified central observatory for road safety. So what they've done in Europe, they've got something called the ERSO, the European Road Safety Observatory. So they collect data, kind of unified data, comparable data from all the European states.
Wow.
To kind of look at the state of safety in European countries. So I think over here we kind of lack a central body that has oversight and authority for traffic safety in the UAE, because there's like in Dubai, you've got the RTA, you've
Dubai
got the police,
police,
you've got the ambulance service, you've got
Yeah.
the hospitals, Dubai Health,
Yeah.
and Abu Dhabi have different. So it's like we haven't got the unified, we have a couple of societies, and the Jamiat Imarat al-Islam al-Mururiya or
Okay.
Emirates Traffic Safety Society, which is a non-governmental organization. But again, I think we really could use a more focused approach with like say one entity that organizes stakeholders and their efforts, because when it's different entities working sometimes together, sometimes not quite in the same vein, so the core matter gets lost, between the different stakeholders. So I think we really need that in the UAE. I sense this is the time for it, and this would really help clarify, to get an honest look at what are the top causes of fatalities and injuries on the roads here, and what more can we do other than what we've been doing the last 20 years.
Interesting. So one thing we read when it comes to good urban design and infrastructure, and we want to ask you this question, Doctor, is we read that roundabouts actually reduce crashes by 75% as compared to intersections. And I know we have some cities in the UAE like Al Ain that use roundabouts a lot. Is this true? Are roundabouts safer than intersections? And can you explain why?
So this is interesting again that you brought it up. Again, it's more in the vein of city planning, I guess, than it is with transportation safety. But it's true. The statistics have been there for a long time with regards to roundabouts and their effectiveness. But there's also different standards to roundabout design. So every country, every state has its own standards. So what defines a safe roundabout is actually very different to what a roundabout can be, because sometimes you see in some cities, I mean, Dubai is a key example, they've been replacing roundabouts with junctions,
right?
But with smart junctions, so smartly controlled traffic lights, and not the standardized, fixed timing traffic lights. So there's, I think, a slight risk increase when you change a roundabout to a junction. But at the same time, I have a very good example in JVC, Ganjumera Village Circle, where I live. We have a bunch of roundabouts there, and very few of them are designed to any international standard that I know of. So they're very confusing for drivers. So they it looks a bit like a cross between a junction and a U-turn. So people aren't sure whose priority it is. So almost every day we see incidents and crashes happen at those roundabouts. So when roundabouts aren't implemented,
wow,
it's a really crazy. Again, I'd like to maybe use this platform to try and call for
go for it. That's the point of us hosting.
More attention being paid to this, because only yesterday I was on the way to the Circle Mall inside JVC, and there was again a Tesla taxi parked in the middle of a roundabout because he'd had a crash with someone else.
No way.
And I was like, and I tell you, when I had a meeting with one of the people in Nakhil communities, I'm like, نحن نتشهد يوم ندش الدوار, it's like we've got to really take care, because I know what the roundabout's designed to do. I know what a roundabout looks like, but when you go into a design that doesn't quite look like a roundabout, people get confused, because we have roundabouts where you can literally drive through without turning your steering wheel one little bit. So you can drive straight through. That's really dangerous, because the whole point of a deflection angle when you go into the roundabout is to slow people down. Exactly. So when you don't have that, you kind of lose the safety aspects. So roundabouts can be a highly effective.
And how do you think that the developers responded to that?
Well, I think let's just say that we could do more to get the voices of residents heard when it comes to urban planning, design, and safety. So I'm really, again, I'm speaking to Dubai Eye Radio, Arabian Radio Network about this, to maybe try and have an event where we can bring in, the RTA, the police, Nakhil, I'mar, and residents to actually get everyone to hear everyone out, because I think right now we've got huge growth in the city, and lots of things aren't being maybe noticed as much. And I think, again, the residents are also willing to help. You must remember that residents have a key role to play, and they can help. But again, they need to kind of have a framework for helping out. I mean, in the US, they've got this huge organization called Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
MAD.
It does an amazing amount of work every year. And it's a completely voluntary organization. It's a completely, so it's like mothers decided, this is enough. Enough of our kids have died in this way. And we want to take a stand. So it's like, I mean, I hope everyone stays safe in the way, but like, what's it going to take for us to begin to take these things more seriously. And I know, personally now, there's sons of ministers, sons of ambassadors, sons of, every single big family here has been touched by the tragedy of transport safety and traffic safety. And when are we going to start doing things differently. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've come a long way from 2001 when we had
Definitely.
like 300 fatalities on the road, say in Dubai. Now we're down to 100. So the number has
Wow.
really gone down.
Yeah.
But still, 100 is 100 too many.
Too many.
Again, every
True.
single one of them is a tragic story behind it.
Of course. We read the statistic actually that more accidents happen in local roads than they do on like arterials or highways. So I wanted to get your opinion. Is that true? And why do you think that is? And I notice, I mean, personally, like, I think we don't have enough traffic calming measures in roads that are in the neighborhoods, اللي هم الشوارع الداخلية or internal roads. Other cities would have a lot of like
Pedestrian crossings.
crossing, stuff like that. Exactly. So what's your opinion about that, or how do you see
And
that?
we don't even have speed limits on those roads, so it's interesting how
Yes.
to
So
maintain
it's,
the...
It's a bunch of issues that you brought up. They're all very, very important. And again, if you look to the Scandinavian example, they've really got neighborhood design down to an art, and they design the neighborhoods so that drivers are kind of forced, even if not visually, if physically, to slow down because they prioritize kids playing in the neighborhood as opposed to drivers driving through. So over here, I don't think, I've not seen it yet in the UAE, but coming back to the point of where, I guess, which areas are safer or less safe. So I was looking at my thesis and the numbers from there from again, a long time ago, about 15 years ago. And at the time, most of the crashes, the serious and fatal crashes in Dubai happened in roads where the speeds were 60 kilometers per hour or less.
Interesting.
Wow. Which is interesting because you think, the high speed roads, 100, 120 kilometers an hour are really dangerous, or we view them as really dangerous. But actually, lots of the serious cases are happening in inner city roads where I say residential areas and commercial areas and business areas. So again, it's a case of, I think you need to look at it on a case-by-case basis. What's happening in this area? Is it a case of we haven't provided enough, pedestrian crossings? Is it a case of distracted drivers? Is it a case of speeds? Sometimes speed limits aren't kind of, you've got an area where you see the speed suddenly go from 80 to 60 to 40 and then back up to 60. And then people can't really, it's difficult to spot the change in speed limit. But I think everybody's unified on the case of, we want our family to be safe. We want our kids to be safe. This is the one thing that unifies everybody. So once you come to probably speak to stop a driver who's maybe tried to overtake a school bus while the school bus is, trying to drop some off, say, if that was your kid in the bus, would you do that?
Yeah.
And then, their perspective would change. So it's we need to, I think, come back to what unifies us and remind all the road users that, the person that you're being inconsiderate to, whether it's a motorcycle rider or a delivery rider or pedestrian, that could be you one day. And again, I was fortunate in the UK, I was without the car for the first 2-3 years. So I had to use the bus. I had to cycle everywhere. I had to walk.
But you still ended up getting a car in the end.
Yes. It was, again, I guess a matter of convenience.
That's what we're used to as well here.
But I like that you touched upon design and how good urban design actually, like in Scandinavian countries, influences driving behaviors. And you mentioned also speed limits. I think speed limits are way less effective when the road design encourages you to drive faster.
Yeah.
And can you talk about, Doctor, like specific things that these countries have done in terms of their road design to make it safer for pedestrians and to make...
Yes, certainly. So it's really... fascinating how, like say, some cities have taken it down to an art, because when you see a picture of a street, a residential street that has had the treatment and one that hasn't had the treatment, the difference is striking. I mean, some cities do take it to extremes in that they ban cars from some streets, but at the same time, that's sometimes not so practical. So if you allow cars in, but in a way that one slows them down. So lots of the times what they do is they narrow the visual perception of the entrance to that area. Because once you see that, you think, oh no, this is a really narrow bridge I have to cross, or really narrow, there's a curb here, there's a curb there.
You'll slow down.
You have to slow down because of you're worried about your car, you're worried about your driving, are you going to hit the curb? So that's one thing they do. The entrances are really narrowed down. And it's sometimes the visual effect of, again, there's something in traffic safety called the see-through effect.
Okay.
This see-through effect causes a lot of crashes because people tend to not notice that there's a give-way sign or a stop sign. If the road, that you're going onto, you're driving through, is parallel to the road you're on right now, and it's literally, it looks like it's a continuous road. Your mind, because lots of the time you're driving subconsciously, you're not really actively
Yeah,
looking
you're on
at the road.
autopilot.
That's so true.
So if it looks like the
It's
road ahead is
continuous.
continuous,
Yeah.
you won't really notice a traffic light, you won't notice a giveaway sign. So sometimes you have to physically separate the two streets, the two roads. If the entrance to the neighborhood looks like, oh, hang on, this road doesn't continue anymore, I have to move over 3 meters to the right to continue. This forces a driver to again, slow down and look, because there's a huge bollard or some traffic calming device in front of me. So this has been really effective as well in forcing drivers to pay attention back to the roads and slow them down and realize that kids might be playing. And the main thing with children, sometimes, they jump around from between parked cars.
Of course.
They come, again, their perception of speed isn't the same as developed as adults. So we just want to give drivers or cars a chance to stop if a pedestrian does come out. And nowadays, most modern cars have got pedestrian detection systems, they've got cyclist detection systems. So the car can actually stop much better than you can. If it detects a risk or an object. But we've got to be at a speed where you can actually stop, where you can physically stop, because stopping distances from 40 kilometers an hour are almost 2-3 times what they are at 20 kilometers an hour. So the stopping distances aren't actually linear. They kind of double and triple with speed.
Wow.
So stopping distances from 100 kilometers an hour are huge. And most people on the roads, they don't realize that leaving a safe distance to the car in front isn't because you're a bad driver or you can't react, or it's just because physically your car can't stop fast enough at those speeds.
Yeah.
So again, it's a combination of maybe education, awareness, and hopefully self-driving cars coming into the road soon that will take
But
the
before
task
we
on.
get into that, I really want to ask you, Dr. Mustafa, what about strategies that are unrelated to non-motorized users? So if we were to take a city like Copenhagen, they've invested in world-class cycling infrastructure, so which reduced obviously the reliance on cars. How do you see initiatives like this being implemented here in a city like Dubai, especially given the fact that we live in a hot, arid climate?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the example of northern Scandinavian cities. Like, say, you wouldn't think Copenhagen would be a good candidate for such an initiative, but people do still cycle in some.
And they have extreme cold, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
The same way we have extreme heat.
So how do they do that? And I was, again, I visited my brother when he used to study at Oxford, and I was surprised Oxford and Cambridge, these cities are very, very cyclist friendly and very anti kind of,
cars.
And like how and why do people do this? So I think over here we see some really versatile road users. We see people going out trying their luck with scooters, with push bikes, with different things. And in the beginning, I used to question myself, when we have a massive road junction being built, like 200 million dirham project, Cloverleaf interchange, many, and you just spend 200 million dirhams on this thing, and there's no provision for any human being who's not in a car to cross this. And it's like, what if you're on a bicycle? What if you're a pedestrian? What if? So I think there's more scope for looking at it. This is like we have the Green Building Code. We have, the codes for people of determination, making sure access for people of determination is right. I think we could also need to go back to the, design books and design rules and say, okay, we can't have a massive infrastructure project. We can't have a massive building. We can't have massive without catering.
meeting certain criteria.
Exactly, because we need to take that on. And especially if we want to encourage our future students and kids to use alternative modes of transport. Because I think nowadays most of the cars driving around Dubai have just the one driver in them.
True.
We need to build capacity. We really need to go back and I think there's ways that we can do it. I mean, if you look around the area around Dubai Mall and the metro station there, there's kilometers of indoor walkways. In that area. So sometimes we can make things indoor. We can do things that suit our environment and suit our weather conditions. And cycling's really picked up here, thanks to our crown princes. Again, attention to cycling. So I think there's more we can do. There's definitely more we can do, but it does take a culture shift. Again, if people have been driving for ages, just to go to the grocery next door or go to the mosque or go to it's going to take a while to change the culture, but I think it's coming. I mean, I can see it in the lack of interest in lots of the newer generation and getting a driving license.
True.
Yeah.
And nowadays it used to be that, a driving license was like
was
a
priority,
really big
A rite of
aspiration.
passage,
priority, yeah.
So
And
yeah.
also from an urban equity perspective, I think for us as urban planners, we always say like not everyone in your population drives. So you have people that are below 18, you have people that are senior citizens, you have people with certain disabilities, or people who just simply can't afford or choose not to drive. So we definitely have to think about offering them convenient transport in the same way we offer car users. And it's almost like not fair that we prioritize one mode of transport over
That's
the
true.
rest. And when it comes to cycling, I just wanted to add to Dr. Mustafa's point that I feel like when it comes to cycling, maybe the direction we've been taking in cities in the region is we use them as leisure or for activities, not so much as first last mile connectivity. So I like that you mentioned downtown or even in general metro stations. It would be really cool if once I get off the metro station, I have for example, bike sharing facilities, e-scooter, micro-mobility, and then dedicated paths from that metro station to whatever destination I want to go to. Maybe that's the gap that we need to be
Yes,
filling in
that's
terms of
definitely
Dubai.
one way of filling that gap. And there's also you've noticed these cars that you can rent by the minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, maybe if there's a
Car
better
sharing,
utilization of these cars, not everybody will feel the need to own a car. Because right now I think the ease of car ownership here is quite high. And we had laws passed a long time ago, which were again stopped by the president about limiting car ownership and so on. So it's a case of we need to look at everything really. I think the city has the capacity to take on everyone and everything and their needs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll take an honest inward look.
Definitely, for
Definitely.
sure.
So now going back to the autonomous vehicles and technologies, so we know the effects, the fact that technologies and IoT are actually transforming cities worldwide. How do you see these innovations enhancing traffic safety here in Dubai?
I mean, thank you for bringing that up because on the one
I
hand,
know it's a really big
I'm
topic.
like, I can't wait for driverless cars to come in and cars that are gonna always keep a safe distance, that are
Right.
always never gonna run out of fuel, never going to park on the in the wrong way and the wrong side.
Or get distracted by a phone or
Yeah.
something.
Yes. So on the one hand, it's like we can't wait for this to happen, but on the other hand, there must be a transition period between these technologies coming in and eventually becoming full-fledged. Because I don't know, can we design areas of the city where you only allow driverless cars?
Interesting.
I mean, there's lots of measures in between now. So I've seen some technologies that, for example, combine with infrastructure to help again improve safety for cars that do have drivers in them. So there's something called V2I or vehicle to infrastructure
yes.
communication. Whereas if there's like a really high chance of, let's say, someone jumping a red light from the other side, this smart junction will detect this and warn the other drivers that hey, this is happening. Either you brake yourself, or if you don't, I'm gonna brake for you. Because so there's intermediate measures that can happen. Unfortunately, lots of the new cars coming onto the market nowadays have some communication capabilities.
Right.
But also, I think there's a real need for consumer education in this respect, because we've got something called the NCAP test, the new car assessment program, which is there's a US NCAP, there's a European NCAP, but there isn't a Gulf NCAP. We're the only kind of region in the world that doesn't have its own 5-star safety assessment protocol.
For cars.
Oh, wow.
For cars, exactly.
Okay.
So just like you rank
same way for-
hotels as a 5-star hotel at the
yeah.
top. So in terms of cars, if a car gets a 5-star rating in NCAP, it's generally a safe car or a very safe car. But again, most of our consumers have no idea about this. We go to the showroom to buy a car based on looks, colors,
Or even fuel
Convenience,
efficiency.
yeah.
I think fuel efficiency, I always see like ratings for fuel efficiency, but never for safety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't we bring that in? Why don't we make that also part of the purchasing decision? Because I think it's very important. And lots of people in this market are driven maybe by economic reasons to go for new brands or unknown brands. But again, does this brand have an airbag? Does it have some basic safety features? Has it been tested? So I really like the enterprising consumers we have here. But at the same time, I'm saying, please do your research. And maybe authorities also need to pick up consumer awareness when it comes to safety, so that people can actually pick safer choices. Like if you're spending, I don't know, 100,000 dirhams on a new car, and you can buy one with a 3-star safety rating or a 5-star, which would you want for your kids? Which would you want for your family? Which would you want for your own safety? So I think there's more definitely much more space for awareness in this area.
But going back to autonomous vehicles, how far do you think we are from it becoming widespread actually here?
So I've seen, autonomous taxis, being tested by the RTA a while back. I've seen some areas like Dubai Silicon Oasis, they're testing out some infrastructure again for this kind of communication. But I think we're still a long way off. I think in the same way that electric vehicles, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, people were thinking that electric vehicles are the future, or hydrogen vehicles are the future, or hybrid. But at the same time, Toyota ventured with the Prius and gave us a really good widespread hybrid. But to this day, electric vehicles haven't really taken off as much as we expected them to. And if they have, there's some issues associated with them, like the costs of a battery pack and the costs of... so that's one thing. So I don't think autonomous cars are maybe coming soon enough.
Right.
But I hope that as the bridging technologies will be there soon enough to make that transition easier.
Yeah.
So I hope that's
And I also believe that, like, when it comes to AVs, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the fastest way to adopt it or make that transition is if all cars were AVs. I think the struggle now is sharing the car with human drivers, and AVs is really the struggle, because for AVs to work best, they all need to be able to talk and communicate with each other. But then once you bring an unpredictable factor or a human driver, this is where it starts to get tricky. And I think this is the biggest barrier we have to really widespread autonomous vehicles. And then if you think about a country like the UAE, where we have different cities with different jurisdictions, it's how do you control that? But I like what you mentioned, Doctor, that having maybe specific areas of the city where you can only use AVs. So you're driving, and then once you get to that specific area, you can let go. The vehicle is talking to the infrastructure, and it guides you through that.
Yeah, because I think we've seen some videos online about San Francisco and some bottlenecks caused by self-driving vehicles because the human beings just won't let them in traffic.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely, for sure. And so with do you have any idea, Doctor, for what specific infrastructure changes we need for electric or autonomous vehicles to become successful in the UAE or in any place? Like, what are specific things you need to upgrade your infrastructure to be able to handle AVs?
Yeah, especially if we're thinking of dedicating an entire neighborhood or a zone just for AVs. Well, it would be interesting to think about what kind of infrastructure would we need to support that.
I've not really looked into the infrastructure side of developments for autonomous vehicles, but I think we have really maybe the most flexible developers here in the UAE, and the most. We have a project called Sustainable City. We have got other areas. So I think if there's anywhere that it could happen, this is the place that we can make it happen. Or we could even take large campuses where entry is kind of restricted, like airports or places like DIP, Dubai Investment Park, or Industrial City, where you've got a large area where you can kind of control it, and you can, easily modify the infrastructure. So I think there's potential, but that definitely needs some more research. And
what about in a residential neighborhood like JVC where you live?
That would be, amazing, because I think already we've got a really large road network there, and we've got everything mapped down to the last building, the last corner, and we've got really, we're approaching capacity when it comes to population in that area. So I think it's a prime, playground possibly for this to be tested out.
So for us at ARKAT, I think one of the ways we see traffic safety is we feel like the best way we can achieve traffic safety is by actually getting people to use cars less on the road and encourage other modes of mobility like metro, walking, cycling. From your perspective, Dr. Mostafa, what advice would you give to young professionals to contribute to having safer, smarter, and more resilient roads in the UAE?
All right. I'm very excited by the future. Things have become, much more accessible. The rate of development has become much quicker now. You can literally write some code, you can develop an application, you can do things much, much faster than it would take long time ago. So my advice would be to be, unafraid to test things out. to just go out and do things, do and forget the theories for a bit.
Yes.
Forget all the, perfectionism for a bit. Just to go for testing things out.
Yes.
I think you will find that you will, after a few iterations, you're going to come up with something that suits what we are going through right now and suits the future generations. And I think, the future is bright.
Yeah, and I would say data for that is crucial. I think we need to have more data available around, like, hotspots, accidents, where you have, where traffic is happening, where roads are unsafe. If we have that data, we can share it, then we can do research to improve upon it.
Yes, definitely. We do need the clean data. We do need the sharing of data and to utilize big data as much as possible. I think that's being underutilized at the minute.
Yeah.
So there's huge scope. Yeah.
What was the first car you ever owned, Dr. Mustafa?
So this again goes back to the UK.
Yeah.
There was a thing called the Rover.
Okay.
214, which was a re-engineered Honda Civic, basically.
Okay.
That was my very first car. It was like another PhD student had just finished his PhD, and he's like, "Oh, Mustafa, I'm leaving. Do you want to buy my car off me?"
That's usually
How
like with college
convenient,
students.
yeah.
Yeah.
How
You
convenient.
inherit
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
else's, exactly. So that was my first car. It served me well for a year. I spent more on insurance than I did on buying the car because, in the UK, young drivers are really expensive to insure.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that car, getting me around, keeping me out of the rain for most of the time. But taking my fellow friends without the car on trips to Tesco's or Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You must have been very
yeah,
popular,
yeah.
of course. And what car do you drive now?
I drive one of my dream cars, which is a Mercedes G-Wagon.
Oh,
nice.
wow.
Okay.
I've been with them. I learned how to drive in one of them.
Yeah.
Like 30 years ago. So I really like them. I really like the engineering. The design grows on you. I know some people don't like the boxy looks, but
I love that
it's
car,
a functional
honestly.
car.
It's a functional
really
car, yeah.
functional car. Yeah.
And maybe a last question, just what would you recommend for, because we talked a lot about maybe like certifications for safe cars and such. What advice would you give for a young family that have kids? What would be like a safe car that you would recommend for them?
So I would really recommend going online, putting in the make and model of the car. Let's say you're looking at a Toyota Previa or a
Yes.
and look for the NCAP rating. So
NCAP rating.
NCAP, New Car Assessment Program.
Yeah.
I think every mass market produced car will have been tested in one continent or another. If not in Australia, in the US, in Europe, and check out the rating. Check out videos, because the rating is basically a combination of all the safety systems of the car, the braking, the airbags, the belts. They do a front crash test, they do a side, they do a rollover test.
Wow.
So they've
Very
already done the work for you.
comprehensive.
Exactly.
Yeah, very
because
comprehensive.
nowadays cars are very complex and it's very challenging to understand the safety differences between cars. So look for an NCAP rating. Like say, if it's 5 stars or even 4
That's
stars.
really good to know,
Yeah.
actually.
It's easier. Just
Yeah.
keep it simple.
Dr. Mustafa, you have your own consultancy too that looks at traffic safety. So maybe, inshallah, this is something that we
Yes.
look to you to
Yeah,
do this
yeah,
rating
to
system
Yes,
in the
I'd
volunteer.
future.
really like to increase consumer awareness in these things and try and help government agencies with the real big challenges they're facing at the moment.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Dr.
you very
Mustafa,
much
for
for
the
having me.
invaluable insights into traffic safety and really helping us understand how we can make our streets safer, more sustainable, more smarter. And to our listeners, of course, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And please, please, please share our episode with family members, with friends, with colleagues, and leave us a review as it helps us reach more listeners like you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mustafa,
you
for
very much.
having us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.